All right. Well, we got a lot of football action going on this weekend. Divisional round, Noah. It's going to be very interesting. I was reading an article in the Ringer, and they were talking about how the extra game seemed to add unnecessary drama and let teams into the playoffs who maybe necessarily didn't deserve to be there. But now we can see that the teams that maybe weren't Super Bowl threats have been shaken out, and now we have super awesome matchups. First up, we got Bengals Titans, and then tonight we have Packers Niners. Tomorrow, Rams Buccaneers, and finally Sunday night is Bills Chiefs. First, I want you to give your picks, and then I'll give mine, and then we'll rock and roll from there and see how things unfold this weekend. So first up, Noah, Bengals Titans.
All right, Bengals Titans. This is a tough one for me because I do love Joe Burrow. As you can see, I'm a Dolphins fan, and Joe Burrow, the quarterback that we should have had if we would have just properly tanked back in 2019. Love Joe Burrow, great quarterback. He's just mentally, he's just the sharpest quarterback you'll ever see. He doesn't have all the physical abilities, of say a Justin Herbert or a Josh Allen, but the cerebralness of Joe Burrow is something I really admire. But however, with that said, love Joe Burrow, but I'm going to have to go with the Titans in this one. I just think they have Derrick Henry back. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? They got Derrick Henry back. I think he's gonna run all over the Bengals. I like the Titans. They're at home. Ryan Tannehill, always going to have a little bit of a soft spot for Ryan Tannehill. Was a very, very good quarterback for the Dolphins under some bad circumstances. They didn't surround him with a lot of talent. I think Ryan Tannehill, he'll have a good game. He's not going to do anything incredible, but he's going to have a good game. Derrick Henry will run all over the Bengals. And I think this is where the Bengals' magical ride comes to an end.
Yeah, I got to go with the Titans here as well. As a Jaguars fan, as much as you don't like seeing the success of divisional rivals, you can't deny greatness. And Derrick Henry coming back, perfect timing. You swear that Jim Ross should be in the commentary booth once the game starts and you hear glass shatter, and then all of a sudden Derrick Henry runs in and he will probably run all over the Bengals. I mean, I'll eat my words if he doesn't, but the Titans are poised to make a run to the AFC Championship, and I think the time is now. So I don't see the Bengals finding a way to win, but I won't necessarily tout this as a blowout. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes down. But next up, we got the Saturday night marquee matchup, 49ers or Packers. I predicted the 49ers to be in this game. However, I also predict the Packers to win this one. The 49ers got pretty lucky towards the end with Dallas mismanaging late game situations and not being able to work the clock properly. So I think Aaron Rodgers is poised to let out a lot of frustrations as to his doubters, and the Packers will take this one for sure.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. And I think what it comes down to is like, who do you trust in the big moment? Do you trust Aaron Rodgers or do you trust Jimmy G? I think you go back to the game last week against the Cowboys. That game was in hand. All the 49ers had to do was not turn the ball over, play safe, don't take any stupid penalties, and you're going to walk out of there with the W. And what does Jimmy G do when they've got the game in hand? You can always count on one ill-advised interception, and there it was, the interception right to Dallas, gets them right back in the game. And that's the stuff I worry about with Jimmy G. And I just think, he's got a hand issue right now. I believe it's a broken finger. I could be wrong about that. But with the hand issue, you're going into the frozen tundra of Lambeau Field. That's a tough place to play. It's a tough place to throw the football to begin with when it's going to be that cold. But when you talk about, a thumb injury or whatever it is for Jimmy G, I mean, that becomes even more difficult to throw the football, especially when you're going up against a guy in Aaron Rodgers, who, in my opinion, is probably the greatest thrower of the football in the history of the NFL. So I got to roll with the Packers. I have a soft spot for Aaron Rodgers. It's the most beautiful throwing motion I've ever seen in my entire life. I love the way he plays the position. I'm rolling with the Packers at home over the 49ers.
Tomorrow's afternoon matchup, Rams at Buccaneers. Now, if the Buccaneers win, and assuming that we're correct on the Packers pick, then it'll be a rematch of last year's NFC Championship. But I think things might turn out a little differently this time. What do you say about tomorrow's matchup between Los Angeles and Tampa Bay?
Well, this is a tough one for me because it's tough to bet against Tom Brady, and it really is, to be honest with you. Like, it's hard for me to say like definitively Tom Brady is going to get knocked out in the divisional round. Usually if he's going to get knocked out, it's going to be either the conference final or the Super Bowl. So it's really tough for me to say this. However, I'm going to take the plunge, and I'm going to take the Rams to go on the road at Tampa Bay and beat the Buccaneers. What's my reasoning for this? I have always loved Matthew Stafford. I have said for 10 years now to anyone that will listen that Matthew Stafford is the most underrated quarterback in football. I love Matthew Stafford, incredible thrower of the football. The throws you see Mahomes making now, the sidearm, the no-look throws, all these show-off throws, what I call them, all these show-off throws from Mahomes that you see him making now is stuff that Matthew Stafford has been doing for 10 years, but he just got no recognition because he was playing for Detroit, obviously, which, they're not good very often, right? So I love Matthew Stafford. I love the way he plays the game. He's got probably, in my opinion, like a top 5, top 6 arm in the history of football. It's an incredible arm. I love Matthew Stafford. He carried really not a very good franchise in Detroit for a long time. And, there's something to be said about that. I'll always have a soft spot for Matthew Stafford. I'm going to take him to go on the road and beat Tom Brady. I think the Rams defensive line is going to get after Tom Brady. And I also think Tristan Wirfs may not play in this game. I could be wrong about that. But I think the thing that Brady struggles most with is interior pressure. If you have good defensive ends, Brady can just step up in the pocket. That's what he's done his whole career. But the way you beat Brady is you get pressure from right up the middle. And I think Aaron Donald's going to be coming right down the seam there, right down the middle, and he's going to get after Tom Brady. Tom Brady doesn't like it when he gets pressure up the middle. If he has to move, scramble to his right or to his left, that's when he runs into problems because we know he's not the most mobile quarterback. So I'm going to roll with the Rams on the road to go and beat Tampa Bay.
Those are great points, man. And you talk about how the defensive line coming up the interior is going to be a huge factor, especially if Tristan Wirfs is out. The one thing that you mentioned is a big difference between last season and this season. Matthew Stafford, a quarterback for the Rams. Jared Goff wasn't too bad in the system, and I think that he does have talent. However, Stafford is an upgrade for sure, and how underappreciated he's been in his entire career, being on the throwing end of both records for receiving titles with Cooper Kupp and Calvin Johnson is no coincidence. He's very, very good. And him being an X factor in tomorrow's game will be huge for the Rams. You mentioned their defense. I think Jalen Ramsey's going to have a good game. As a former Jaguars fan, it's always tough to see him succeeding with other teams. But at the same time, you understand his reasoning for leaving. So we're not going to get into that can of worms right now. But at the end of the day, I think the Rams defense plus Matthew Stafford being the pivot for the Rams is going to be the difference. So I have to take Los Angeles. And then the next game, this is going to be the Jim Nantz, Tony Romo Sunday night matchup for the ages. Bills at Chiefs, rematch last year. And it's all come back. The Stephon Diggs clip of him staring at the Chiefs holding up the AFC Championship trophy to getting one more crack. Noah, take me through what you think is going to go down in tomorrow's game.
Well, before we go any further, I think at first we just have to acknowledge you brought up Tony Romo, the best color commentator of football I've ever seen in my entire life. I love Tony Romo. Didn't get enough credit as a quarterback, actually. Very underrated quarterback and very misunderstood quarterback. But anyhow, getting back to the game here. This is a tough one for me. I think this is the one that I've struggled the most with. The Chiefs at home, I mean, they're a powerhouse. Their offenses finally seem to have picked it up. They had some struggles early in the year, but the Chiefs seem to be getting going now at the right time. They're getting hot at the right time. They, obliterated the Steelers last week, which does scare me. But on the other hand, you got that 6'5", 230-pound monster on the Bills. Josh Allen, bazooka for an arm, absolute bazooka. I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said the thing about Josh Allen is you can be rolling into Buffalo in the middle of a rainstorm, a windstorm, a torrential downpour, a tornado, and your coach just looks around at the locker room and goes, "We got Josh Allen. He can throw it through anything. That arm is it's unlike anything I've ever seen." People said Mahomes' arm was incredible, but I think Josh Allen might actually have him beat. One more thing I'm going to say before I make my pick. You remember the old quarterback long distance challenges at the Pro Bowl? I would I would love to see that brought back. I've been pushing for it for a long time now. I want to see the long distance throw again because I would love to see Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Justin Herbert compete in the long distance throw. I'd love to see who can throw the farthest between those three. But I'm going to roll with the Bills on the road. I think this is their time. They went into Kansas City last year in the playoffs and they got beat by the Chiefs. But I think they're familiar with that field. They played there earlier this year. It's kind of similar when the Bombers played in Calgary a couple times and they got familiar with that field in Calgary. And there's just a comfortability. I think the Bills are going to go on the road. I think they're going to upset the Chiefs. And I think Josh Allen's going to have a big day.
Yeah, those are all amazing points, Noah. And you look at how Josh Allen has continued to develop from someone that clearly people doubted from the beginning of his career, especially coming out of Wyoming. And Patrick Mahomes was in a similar boat, though. He went to Texas Tech and people were like, he's going to be boomer bust. He has to be in the right system. And he's done phenomenal as well. Both teams that are heating up at the right time. I think that's why it is the Sunday night matchup. It's going to be huge. And having the best commentators, Tony Romo, fantastic color analyst, Jim Nantz, iconic as always. So it'll be super fun to watch. But I do also take the Bills winning this one. It is a tough pick to make. I don't think it's easy by any means for anybody, unless you are a homer for either team or unless you know something we don't. But the Bills, like you said, having that comfortability with having played at Arrowhead, being in that similar situation and understanding from what they learned in last year's game against the Chiefs and taking it up that extra notch, I think that they're going to have what it takes to finally get over the hump and be able to shock the Chiefs. Now, mind you, it's still going to be a very close game. I don't see it being more than one score either way, but I think Buffalo is finally going to get the monkey off their back. So with that, I know we all had the same picks across the board, but we both had that before coming onto this podcast segment. So there's no manipulation for the listener thinking that we're just agreeing with each other. Very tough picks to make for all games, because at this stage in the playoffs, anything can happen, but it's still going to be super exciting to watch and see how it all unfolds, starting with Bengals Titans today at 4:30 Eastern. And the second part of the segment that we're going to cover is related to the background and the sweater and the great color teal between both these Floridian teams, Jaguars and Dolphins, both teams that we have grown up and cheered for. And now we're going to get a little bit of analysis as to what we think should happen in the offseason for these teams, particularly starting before the draft. Noah, take it away first with the Dolphins.
All right. So this is a very complex issue with the Dolphins. Okay. You have to really understand the Dolphins' decision to draft Tua and just everything that's gone on there in the last few years. You have to go back. I think it all starts in the 2018 college football national championship game. And from what I've heard from multiple sources is the minute that the Dolphins organization saw Tua Tagovailoa look off that safety to the right, come back to the left and throw the dime to Devontae Smith for the game-winning touchdown, it was love at first sight. That's to my understanding how it worked out. When they saw him as a true freshman come in there and win the national championship game, the Dolphins immediately fell in love with Tua. Now, Tua went on to have 2 more years of success at Alabama. He played very well. His numbers were very, very good by any metrics. Meanwhile, my whole life, I never really picked a definitive team. And then in 2019, I said, all right, you know what? It's time to pick a team. I'm not going to hop on a bandwagon. I'm not going to pick a team that's already been to the top and, is going for another Super Bowl. I'm going to pick a team that's at the bottom and I'm going to, watch them come up. And so in 2019, I picked the Dolphins. I have my reasons. I love Josh Rosen. I thought he was going to be a great quarterback coming out of the draft. So not one of my finer moments on that one. But the Hebrew Hammer, man, I had to get behind him. I loved Rosen. So when Arizona moved on from him and shipped him off to Miami, I chose the Dolphins. My dad was a Dolphins fan his whole life, so it was kind of an easy decision for me to cheer for the Dolphins. So I picked the Fins, and 2019 was supposed to be the tank year. They were supposed to tank the entire season, finish with the first pick in the draft, and draft whoever the top quarterback was going to be. Now, going into the year, it was supposed to be Tua. That was supposed to be the guy who was going to be the first quarterback off the board. Unfortunately, as the year went on, we started to see that Joe Burrow became an incredible quarterback and who never got his shot at Ohio State University. And Joe Burrow had one of the most incredible college football seasons you will ever see in your entire life. I think it was 60 touchdown passes and at 5,000 yards, might have even been 6,000. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it. Now, meanwhile, in Miami, we go back to Miami. They blew the tank. They blew the tank. They were supposed to have the first pick in the draft. They started the season, I think it was like 0-11 or something like that. And analysts were talking about, is this the worst football team we've ever seen? Because you have to remember, before the year, the Dolphins traded Laramie Tunsil, they traded Minka Fitzpatrick, they traded Kenny Stills, and these were all some of the Dolphins' best players. And so people were saying, okay, so not only are they losing all their talent, but they want the first pick. So could this be like a winless football team? So as time goes on, Brian Flores basically, this from what I've heard, everything I've heard, basically goes, I don't want to tank. I don't want to. And Brian Flores all of a sudden flips the switch, and the Dolphins win like 5 of their last 6 games, and they finish the season 5-11. So all of a sudden, their first overall pick in the draft is gone, and the Dolphins are kind of in limbo. They don't know what to do. Joe Burrow is the presumptive number 1 pick and undisputed number 1 pick, and Tua is coming off a major hip injury. Now they can't get Burrow. Okay, they wanted Burrow. Just to be clear, from everything I've heard, the Dolphins wanted Burrow. How the owner wanted Burrow, especially. The owner pushed very hard for them to get Burrow. Now, they realized pretty early in the process that Cincinnati was not trading that number 1 pick. Joe Burrow grew up in Ohio. It was a match made in heaven to go to the Bengals. So the Dolphins had to have a fallback plan. And their fallback plan was Tua. And I don't think that they ever stopped and wondered, should our fallback plan have been Herbert? And the Dolphins, from everything I've heard, offered 3 first-round picks to get up to that first overall pick to draft Joe Burrow, but they couldn't do it. So instead, they said, all right, well, we'll take Tua. And I think we're seeing very quickly how this one is going to age. It's not going to age very well. Tua, I'll just give you a quick synopsis here. Tua, he's 5'11". He's got a mediocre arm. He's injury prone. He's been injured every year in college. He's been injured in the pros too. He's immobile. He doesn't run very much. He can't really move. He's left-handed, and he had a poor Wonderlic score. Whereas on the other hand, you have Justin Herbert, who is 6'6". He has no injury history whatsoever. He has an absolute bazooka for an arm. He runs a 4.6 40. He had a very high Wonderlic score. If you don't know for those who don't know, the Wonderlic score is the Wonderlic test is a test that kind of measures mental aptitude, sharpness, and stuff like that. A lot of mathematics, problem-solving questions. Justin Herbert scored very high on that, and that's not really a surprise because Justin Herbert had a 4.0 GPA at the University of Oregon while being the starting quarterback. Not many people can do that. So, in hindsight, you're like, well, how did the Dolphins mess this up? How did they not take Justin Herbert? All the signs were there that Justin Herbert was going to be the better quarterback. Well, before the draft, it wasn't such an easy question. Now in hindsight, we go, okay, Herbert is on his pathway to being a top 5. I mean, if he's not already a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Tua, on the other hand, I won't get into my real thoughts, but I think he's probably going to be a career backup. Is my honest synopsis here of Tua. But Flores realized pretty early on that Tua wasn't going to be the guy and that he just didn't have the skill set to be a great NFL quarterback. So they began trying to trade for Deshaun Watson. And, we won't get into all that stuff. That's a whole nother subject. But anyhow, they ended up not being able to acquire Watson. And it looks like we're going to go with Tua for another year. And I am just devastated because I wanted Watson. For all his off the field issues, there's no debate. The guy is a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the NFL. I would have loved to have acquired Watson. Unfortunately, they couldn't get him. And it looks like we're going to go with Tua for another year. Now, if I had to guess, what I think is going to happen is he's not going to have a great season. And we're going to be in the quarterback market next year when Bryce Young and CJ Stroud from Ohio State are going to be the top quarterbacks in the draft. Now, if I were the Dolphins, I would pass on both of them because I'm not completely sold on either. Bryce Young, again, an undersized quarterback, plays at Alabama, a lot of talent is surrounding him. I would pass on Bryce Young. CJ Stroud could be a decent quarterback, but I think there's a better quarterback in college football, and it's one that I'm in love with. I will admit it. I have a man crush on this guy. And if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you my hairstyle in a second. This is how far this has gone for me. I want the Dolphins to tank for 2 years and complete the 2-year tank and get the quarterback that I want, whose name is Quinn Ewers. He's playing at the University of Texas. He transferred from Ohio State. He's now at the University of Texas. I've seen videos of him in high school throwing the ball 75 yards as a grade 11, junior. Just an incredible arm. If I were the Dolphins, I would tank for 2 years and I'd get Quinn Ewers. I dyed my hair bleach blonde. I got the mullet going on at the back. If you don't know it, look it up. Quinn Ewers, the most incredible mullet you'll ever see. I would complete the tank for Quinn Ewers, but if I had to guess, what's going to happen is they're not going to be very good next year, and they'll trade up in the draft for either CJ Stroud or Bryce Young of Alabama. And that is my synopsis of the Dolphins.
Yeah, man, it's definitely really tough when you consider all things that A, hindsight is 2020, and B, organizations are just as flawed as many people who make predictions on who they think teams should draft. And, there are teams that have really, really intelligent front office personnel, but there's other teams that make decisions that make you think, well, I could have made that decision and it would have been better. Again, it's the NFL. So lots of politics involved with who's in what position, what player gets taken where, what coaching decisions are made that lead to the rise or fall of teams. But for the Dolphins, it is a tough position to be in because they've kind of been in that 7-9 to 9-7 limbo traditionally without the 17-game season. So to have Tua and then be 10-6 and just miss the playoffs doesn't really warrant a coach or organization being like, well, that's it, tear it all down. We got to start from square one. They're going to be like, well, we went 10-6. We got to let it ride. The Jaguars went 5-11 and 6-10 and then 1-15 before finally letting go of Dave Caldwell and Doug Marrone. So sometimes the leash is way longer than you'd like it to be for organizations to do a full reset. And that helps us transition into the next part of the segment with what the Jaguars should do. They fired Urban Meyer during the season. He wasn't having success and was definitely a very poor coaching hire in hindsight. They swung for the fences, which you don't really blame any organization for. But again, there was a lot of people in the media that had speculation about what he would do in Jacksonville based on certain red flags and different things that came up during the beginning of his tenure. And then you saw it unfold during the season with him not being able to really show accountability and ownership at the podium when it came to answering for the decisions he made, especially with the James Robinson benching, et cetera. The long story short is that now they're in a position to reset, help Trevor Lawrence, build around him. But the one piece standing in the way so far, or that maybe the one piece left, is Trent Baalke as general manager. He was in San Francisco, had a poor draft history. There was, I guess, people had talked about how he contributed to a very stubborn and toxic work environment for the 49ers organization when they started to struggle after their failure to win the Super Bowl with Colin Kaepernick. And it shows in how when he left, then the organization rose back up, and now they've been to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs a few years ago. They're back in the NFL playoffs and are in the divisional round. So they're doing successfully, all things considered for the average NFL team, making the playoffs multiple years and being able to make the Super Bowl, even if they didn't win, they're still a respectable organization. So for the Jaguars, it's pretty simple. For them to fully hit reset, they have to, and to give themselves the best chance to build around Trevor, they got to fire Trent Baalke. They have to get a new GM. My opinion on who they should have as the trio of gentlemen leading the organization should be Byron Leftwich as head coach, Adrian Wilson from the Arizona Cardinals as a general manager, and then Jim Caldwell as the vice president of football operations, as a well-respected and also, like a Matthew Stafford, super underrated for what he's done and the success he's had in the NFL. If that trio of guys can be together to lead the Jaguars, then I think that they'll be in a better position to find success a few years down the road.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Should they have taken Mac Jones?
No.
I'm kidding. Obviously,
No.
Trevor Lawrence was the correct decision. But
yeah,
hard
Mac
to
Jones
see.
is going to find success because he's in a successful organization, not because he's going to drag a team by the bootstraps to the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Lawrence was the right pick. He has a higher ceiling. Mac Jones, he's a limited athlete. But Mac Jones, I mean, when you're surrounded by a great organization, sometimes you become a pretty good quarterback, right? And for Trevor Lawrence, when you're surrounded by, all kinds of inept and, just dysfunction, sometimes, that becomes who you are as a quarterback. So anyhow, hey, what did you think of them beating the Colts to send in all my years? Probably the most embarrassing loss that I've ever seen an NFL team endure is when the Colts, playing a team where, first of all, how many games had the Jags won before that? 2 games?
They were 2-14.
They won 2 games before that. And the fans are literally protesting their GM wearing clown faces and clown outfits to the game. And the Jaguars come in there, and the Jaguars beat the Colts in Jacksonville. In all my years, I've never seen anything like it. Like, the Colts win in your end game. All they got to do is beat the Jaguars, fans are literally protesting their own franchise, and the Jaguars win. One of the most amazing stories you'll ever hear.
Honestly, I kind of expected it because I was like, well, when all hope seems lost and the season seems like one of the worst in franchise history based off previous expectations, count on the Jaguars to do the most Jaguars thing and win in absolutely convincing fashion in the most unpredictable and unforeseen way possible. That is a very Jacksonville Jaguars thing to do. So if there's anything I've learned in my years as a Jaguars fan, it's to expect the unexpected, usually in a negative sense, but there's always that small positive glimmer of hope that's sprinkled in once in a while. And this was the case of that. Seeing them continue their streak, beating the Colts at home. Honestly, I didn't mind seeing them win because winning football games is never a bad thing, unless it's to miss out on Trevor Lawrence, Jets fans. I'm sorry. But yeah, like, it was fun to watch that throw that he made to Marvin Jones in the back of the end zone. Unbelievable throw. I'm sure that you were all over that and very excited to see such a beautiful work of art from Lawrence. And when you also consider how well he's done this year with the amount of ineptitude and dysfunction that has been in the organization, he deserves a lot of credit for how well he's done and some of the throws he's made that fans had never seen a Jaguars quarterback really make ever before, or not even for a long time. And also considering the fact that the Jaguars basically led the NFL in drops. I think maybe they didn't officially, but go back and watch the tape. There were so many drops. I'm sure that the stats guy missed a drop before, he was going right down 3 drops. And by the time his head poked up, they already had 4 more drops. So the Jags receiving core definitely struggled. Losing Chark sucked. Losing Jamal Agnew sucked. And the fact that a special teams ace traditionally was one of their best offensive players says all you need to know about how the season went for the Jaguars. But I digress. The end of the season on a positive note, and firing Trent Baalke, restarting, and building from the ground up is all that they can do.
I think it's funny you bring up Zach Wilson, though, Matthias, because my most controversial opinion. I tend to agree with Chris Sims on this one. I'm sure you know Chris Sims, the son of Phil Sims. I listen to him religiously. Every morning I wake up, I listen to the Chris Sims podcast. He's my favorite guy in the media right now. And the guy knows his quarterbacks. And
which is why he became a professional quarterback, right?
Yes. I hate to say it. I actually do agree with Chris Sims. And I think Zach Wilson, I think if you put them in the same situation and you surround them with talent and you surround them with, good coaching and organizational stability, I think Zach Wilson has a higher ceiling than Trevor Lawrence. I love Zach Wilson. He was my number 1 quarterback before the draft last year. The arm talent is just unlike anything I've ever seen. The off-platform throws. I love Zach Wilson. But the Jags are going to be fine. If they can surround Trevor Lawrence with a better organization, better management at the top and better coaching staff. And, we won't even get into the whole Urban Meyer stuff, but that's a whole discussion for another day. It would have been, let's just say it would have been tough for any quarterback to have success in that environment. So Trevor Lawrence, he'll be fine. They just got to surround him with, a better support system.
And the final part of our segment today has to do with just our thoughts on how free agency has gone for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers after another successful Grey Cup championship. 2 back-to-back after seeing 0 in our life is pretty amazing. So very grateful. Always rep the W. The Bombers made many marquee decisions. Like, we cannot discredit any of the signings they've made. All of them have been home runs. The decision to bring back Zach Collaros and make him the highest paid player in the CFL after 17-2 start and a unanimous most outstanding player, first since Milt Stegall in 2002. Noah, I know you're the quarterback guy. Give me your quick thoughts on this re-signing for the Bombers.
All right. Well, before we go any further, let's just pull this baby out here. This guy has changed my life. Zach, I want you to know, Zach, I just want you to know, if you're listening, Zach, you are my hero. You are my hero through and through. I will never forget these 2 incredible runs to the Grey Cup that Zach Collaros has given us. Where do we even begin here? Let's start in 2019, the first one. The trade to acquire Zach Collaros at the trade deadline could go down in CFL history as one of the greatest trades in the history of the league. It was very close to not getting done. I'm sure you know this, Matias. It was very close to not getting done. But the trade for Collaros will go down in history as a franchise-altering decision. And then in the offseason, obviously we won the Grey Cup. And in the offseason, there was kind of a conversation of, do you bring back Nichols or do you bring back Collaros? You're probably not going to be able to keep both. So we had to pick one. And I preached all offseason that Zach was the guy. Zach got us over the hump. And it just seemed like Nichols could never get us over the hump. It just seemed like we had a lot of chances, a lot of years where we were, in it till the end. And Nichols just couldn't seem to get us over the hump, for lack of a better term. But I really use the analogy. I've used this one with you many times. This analogy. When the game was on the line and, the game was in the balance and the Bombers were either, they were up by 4 points. I think about the game against Calgary the year before in 2018 when the Bombers were in the West Final against Calgary. And you were just saying to yourself, Nichols, just one big throw and this game is over. This game is ours. We just need one big throw. And Nichols, just every single time it was a big situation, he seemed to get conservative and he would be complacent to throw these 5 yards, 7-yard check downs. He just, there was just a refusal to throw the ball down the field. And then, you see it come full circle in 2019 in the West semifinal against Calgary. Matt Nichols is out with an injury and Zach Collaros is in there at quarterback. And Zach Collaros, with the Bombers up by 4 points and the game in the balance with, I think it was like 7 minutes left in the game, Zach Collaros is not afraid to throw the deep ball and go for the jugular, go for the kill shot, as we like to call it. Zach Collaros with the killer instinct. In my opinion, the biggest difference between Nichols and Collaros, in all honesty, throughout the majority of their careers, very similar quarterbacks statistically. However, in the big moments, Zach Collaros has the killer instinct. Matt Nichols didn't. And Zach Collaros throws a 45-yard frozen rope to Darvin Adams down the left sideline, right over Trey Roberson, one of the best corners in the CFL. Collaros, not afraid to go for the jugular. He hits the big play to Darvin Adams, ends the game, and could have probably ended Calgary's dynasty. I think when we look back on it in the big picture here. And the Bombers would go on to obviously beat Saskatchewan and beat Hamilton in the Grey Cup. And the rest is history. And the decision to re-sign Collaros, one of the best decisions this franchise has ever made. You look at Matt Nichols in Ottawa, it's not looking too good. You look at Zach in Winnipeg. I mean, wow. Like it just, I've talked to a few of my friends. There were differing opinions. How would this follow up season go? Would Zach get injured early in the year? Would Zach, play well enough for us to, make it far in the playoffs? I don't think anyone could have predicted that Zach would have the season he had, the MOP season. I'm the biggest Zach Collaros fan there is, but even I could not have foreseen what transpired in Winnipeg. Amazing first MOP since you'll know the stat. I think
Milt Stegall, 2002.
First MOP for the Bombers since 2002, since Milt Stegall. It's an incredible story, and in all honesty, one of the greatest comeback stories in the history of sports, definitely in the history of the CFL. I mean, everyone said there were real questions about whether the guy should retire, call it a career, too many shots to the head, too many concussions. Is it not safe for him to be playing? Should he call it a career? Zach Collaros, just never give up. That's the best way I can put it. Keep going, never give up. It's an amazing comeback story, and I will forever be indebted to Zach Collaros because I love the guy. And what more needs to be said? Love the Bombers, Grey Cup champions. That's all that needs to be said.
That is all that needs to be said, man. It's really interesting how the follow-up season, people are like, oh, well, it's just 4 games. And I remember I made a top 10 video of who I think are the best Bomber quarterbacks in the 21st century. And I put Collaros at number 4, and it was James who actually swayed my opinion. Originally, I was like, maybe an honorable mention, but he was like, well, think about this. In 4 games, he did more than how many quarterbacks have done since 2000 for this team. I was like, you know what? Okay, sure. Maybe, to quote you, not a big enough body of work, but you have to pay respects to what he did in a short amount of time. If you can follow it up, then we can have a different conversation a year later. Here we are a year later, and we're having a different conversation. You could argue that Collaros is the best Bomber quarterback since 2000 now. No questions asked. Winning an MOP, winning a Grey Cup, clean slate from game 1 in a new season, not jump on a team that's already had success and just be that X factor. They didn't bring back all the same people. Of course, hard to in the CFL with how the contracts are right now, but they made the right decisions. He had the talent surrounding him. Yeah. And obviously you look at what has happened in Ottawa, like they've struggled to put a great product on the field the last few years after 3 successful runs to the Grey Cup. Really unfortunate for their organization. And then Marcel Desjardins taking the fall. So it's not been a great time in Ottawa for Red Blacks fans, but at the same time, when you look at the difference between what both quarterbacks were able to do with the same talent, that is the real story. And if you look observationally, Nichols with the same level of talent versus Collaros with the same level of talent, 2 different results. Do the Bombers make it all the way to the Grey Cup and win? If they don't go through the adversity they experienced in 2019 of having to go back and forth between, well, should Strebler start, or should we keep him as our guy? And Strebler was great for the Bombers. No, this is no slight against him, but I don't know if they would have won the Grey Cup with him being a quarterback and them not having any backup or that 1-2 punch. Strebler was amazing and really dynamic with Collaros as that 1-2 punch to shake things up. But you can see how they were able to do the next year. I was worried. I'm like, well, it's great that Strebler got the opportunity in the NFL, but will that hinder the Bombers if they don't have that 1-2 punch? And I was wrong. It didn't hinder them. If anything, they were able to be unleashed on offense, did absolutely outstanding in the throwing game. Buck Pierce is a new OC, people doubting him. I remember seeing in the leader post in Regina, they were saying, well, the Bombers will probably go 6-8. Andrew Harris will fall off the wheels. The wheels will fall off the wagon and blah, blah, blah. And like 11-3. Consider as well, the game they lost to Montreal was basically inconsequential. So if the Bombers put the pedal to the metal every game, they probably could have went 13-1. The game against the Argos that they lost, fair and square. All credit to the Argos for winning that game. But in meaningful games, Collaros has lost once. So I think that kind of speaks for itself.
I think, Matthias, that you raised the question of who is the best Bomber quarterback of our lifetime. It's not even up for discussion anymore. I mean, it's really not. Like,
No.
I remember we did a top 5 Blue Bomber quarterbacks of our lifetime about a year ago. During quarantine, we were both pretty bored, so we did the list. And I remember, I think I put Kevin Glenn at the top, and I think Matt Nichols was like number 2. And I think kind of, the conclusion I came to was that there wasn't a big enough body of work for Zach to put him, at the top. it's not even a question anymore. Zach Collaros, the best Bomber quarterback I've ever seen in my lifetime. The first quarterback since I've been watching to win the MOP. I know Kahari Jones won it once.
2001, yeah.
Yeah, but I really wasn't watching back then. I would have been like 5 years old, I think.
Yeah,
so, the Collaros, it's an amazing story. The greatest comeback story in the history of the CFL, in my opinion.
Thank you to the listener for enjoying today's segment with my great friend Noah, as always, to share his quarterback, the great, illustration of the art of being a quarterback, to talk a little bit of Jags, Dolphins, Bombers as well. Make sure to enjoy this Saturday and Sunday's slate of playoff games, and we'll see you next time.